Let's give it up for Brad Feld, everyone.
That's how Jews dance. We play tennis.
It's a beautiful thing.
Showing us up.
That's how you dance too.
Starting us off with a Jewish joke. This is good.
Yeah.
So this has been a great day, and it just keeps. We had the mayor, we had Magic, and then us. So it just keeps. We just keep moving.
It's better.
Moving on up here.
Or
Perfect.
Down,
It's
down
like the people pour out the doors. The doors are being held open. Thanks a lot. That guy right there, you leaving right now. Thank you. This has been an awesome day, and I've like almost cried this morning with Lizzie, and I was laughing with the mayor. I think we'll be somewhere in between that, maybe with like either a cringe or a laugh cry with this one. And we're going to start out with you, Brad. We're talking about the future, what's trending in 2016, and how does it get discovered? Tell us about your shirt. I think, is this going to be a trend? Is this happening? And your shoes, your Star Wars shoes. Tell us.
My shoes are so last year at this point, but just think of my clothing as adult Garanimals. My wife Amy buys all my clothes for me, and if it was left to my own device, I wear the same shirt every day and the same pants every day and probably the same underwear every day. So I get a refresh whenever I'm around her.
This is the same brand, not the same
Yeah,
brand.
so the shirts are, the short story very quickly is Robert Graham. He's actually become a very significant clothing brand. Amy, about 7 years ago, I came home one day to my closet. We have a big closet. I have like one little part of the big closet that's hers. And all of my shirts, which were basically t-shirts with words on them, had been given away to Goodwill. Like 100 or something of them. And in their place were about 20 shirts like this. And she said, these are the shirts you will now wear. And that was about 6 or 7 years ago, and I haven't stopped.
Sounds like my wife. Okay, let's get started. Before we look,
you don't want fashion advice from either of us?
What's that?
You don't want fashion advice from either of us?
Yeah. What have you got? Tell us what's happening.
Let's keep moving.
Actually, when is the Product Hunt Fashion Channel?
Oh, that would be fun. I think would you contribute? Would you post some?
I would have Amy contribute. Yeah, sure.
All right.
We've got Eric Paley from Founder Collective out of Boston. We've got Ryan Hoover from Product Hunt, and of course Brad Feld from Foundry Group. Before we look forward, let's just look back a little bit. Angel investors are up. Funding valuations are down. Q4, there's about a 15% drop in average valuation price. Let's start with you, Eric. What's happening? What's been happening in the last 3 or 4 months in the market, and what are you seeing right at this moment with valuations and with companies?
Yeah, I think it's been a pretty historic, straight up since 2009. And we've been very lucky we got into the business in 2009. So in terms of venture capital. So it's been a pretty amazing period. And I think as capital starts to see success, capital chases that type of success. So I think we saw a little bit of a peak hit earlier in the year. And then all of a sudden, people started realizing the IPO window was not so strong. It was actually the worst IPO year in years. And all of a sudden, that sort of trickles all the way down the system as sort of the late stage investors start thinking about repricing. You've got IPOs that are actually pricing below late stage rounds and all the way down. But it takes time to ripple back down. So I think angels have still been pretty active. I think if the market, and I can't predict the market, I'm not going to try to, but if the market stays shaky, I think you'll see some pullback there as well. And I think that will keep rippling, including valuations, as you mentioned.
How have entrepreneurs changed? Because it feels like I became an entrepreneur 7 years ago. It feels like there are definitely way more people in the pool. Are we still getting a high quality of person? Is it getting diluted? Is there, Floodgate always talks about like there's 10 Thunder Lizards every year that you have to get in. Has it changed with just the number of people getting in tech?
I think there's a more foundational change, which is that two things are happening at the same time. One is it costs so little money to get started that compared to 15 or 20 years ago, the notion of being a founder and starting a company, the actual cost of entry, the real cost of entry, not the all you need is a computer and a connection, but to get going is $500,000 $1 million to a point where you either have something that maybe has a semblance of being interesting and working or not, versus 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is 10 million bucks. Intersecting with this notion that the information about how to be an entrepreneur, how to be an effective founder, about what to do, is become extraordinarily democratized in lots of different ways, whether it's product hunt or accelerators or books or blogs, or, oh, by the way, anybody anywhere in the world has access to this information. So these two things have collided. And I have a pretty deep belief that we have a fundamental structural shift in the way companies are being created at the early stages. That's different than the scale of the company. The mistake, I think, is that historically, if you use past as a guide, you start to say, oh, there's too many things getting started, there's too many people that are trying things, there's lots of marginal stuff. That's all bullshit. That's good. Because the way you learn is by trying something, having it completely screw up, and only losing $1 million. And if you're a smart investor, smart angel investor, and that person's talented, you want to give them another $1 million because now they're going to be a lot smarter about what they do next. If they're not talented or they don't learn or whatever, that's a different issue. It used to be that cost was so much higher, and it was so geographically concentrated. And those two things are really powerful.
And sorry, I just want to add, we talk a lot about this Founder Collective, but we really believe companies are made, they're not born. I think there are, and due credit to Mike, because I think he's a great investor, but I think after the fact, there will be some limited number, and hopefully that number is going to go up, as Brad is saying, over time, of extraordinary companies created in each vintage. But in the beginning, these companies are not preordained towards success. And it sounds like they are when people say that. And if you're an angel who writes a lot of checks and don't check in very much on those companies, and most of them flame out, and one of them ends up being great, you kind of have this perception, well, that company was born great. But I think these companies have to be made, and I think there's way more company making in terms of success than there was 10 years ago for all the reasons Brad's saying.
So this leads perfectly into Product Hunt. So if I can describe Product Hunt, it is every single day people launch new products on Product Hunt, and it's a collection of the best products that launch on the internet. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. And to Brad's point, yes, there are more and more people building products or building companies, and I think it's a great thing. Not all of them will succeed.
Well, the vast majority of them will fail.
Exactly.
Start from that premise. If we're not operating from the premise that the vast majority won't work, but that doesn't mean that you failed. That doesn't mean that you're done. It means that you failed at that company. And I think that's the thing that is so, we talk about it, failure is okay and all this sort of thing, but when the cost is so high, I failed only cost my investors $100 million. That's very different than I failed and it only cost $500,000 and took a year to figure out that I failed, right? Then you can keep that iterative cycle.
In some ways, the failures inspire people who do build things that are very meaningful. There are companies that maybe were too early and they paved the way for future companies. So there's a lot of that happens. There's role models that come through that as well. And for me, my personal stance on that is it's great to see more people building things. There's also a lot more visibility into entrepreneurship from a technology and startup perspective than ever before. And some of these people, if we went back 40, 50 years, like my dad, for example, he is an entrepreneur and has been for his entire life, yet he doesn't know really anything about technology. When I told him that we raised VC money, he said, what's a VC? But he's an entrepreneur in a different way. He sold video games at the back of his car and then started a video game store and did all these other things, but in a different way. And our visibility in the startup ecosystem is just not on that, but that's been existing. That's been around for a long time.
What trends do you see of products and the types of products and the industries of products getting created that you guys are then curating? Have you seen anything change as the markets have tightened, as funding has tightened? Have you seen any shift in products?
I don't know if I've seen shifts directly related to the VC funding landscape and how that's changed, but there are certainly cyclical or changes in the market and things that people are building. I was just reflecting over the past year or so. Secret launched, I think, 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a year ago.
That was a great segment.
I can't remember. But around that time, there were a lot of anonymous.
What did you say, Brad?
That was a great segment.
Yeah.
Right, the anonymous hater segment?
Well, yes, exactly. That was a segment. And what I'm getting to is there are interesting moments in the technology space where everyone is on top of a certain trend. And for a while, it was anonymous apps or anonymous apps, whatever you want to call it. And that was a trend. Now, today, it's Slack. Everyone is building a Slack integration, a Slack product. Slack, of course, now has this fund that they're going to invest in Slack-first companies, which is really fascinating to see.
We heard in the video this morning that all these very well-known investors talking about the trends that they missed, the things that they, that surprised them. We had self-driving cars, AR, what else? Drones. These are what percentage of the pitches or business plans not business plans, but the products that you see, do these types of products, are you seeing a lot of these products, these things that we think, oh wow, this is this new cool thing? Like, are you seeing a lot of drone startups coming to Techstars, Brad? Are you guys, Eric, are you seeing a lot of AR startup, like a disproportionate amount of these kind of companies coming in with these trends sort of taking off?
I think there are these self-fulfilling prophecies where the press starts covering a few entrepreneurs get interested in something, some VCs find it interesting, the press gets interested in that story, starts telling the story. Entrepreneurs are looking for the next thing to work on. They say, well, geez, this blockchain thing is really, really interesting, and it is really interesting. And they're not necessarily there for native reasons, or at least the way we think about it. They're not there because they saw a use case and a pain they wanted to solve. They're there because they think that's a place they can build it's an interesting theme where interesting things are going to happen, and VCs want to fund it, and I'm going to go run that. We call those waves. We see a lot of waves. It's amazing. We saw 3 luggage companies within a couple weeks of each other, right? Why are there 3 high-tech luggage companies within a few weeks of each other?
We're seeing a lot of on-demand fuel companies too lately. I don't know why.
Did you invest in one?
And we didn't, actually. And that's not to say we wouldn't. We
You already have a couple, or what?
we already had 3 in the portfolio. We didn't want to add any more.
You can never have too many luggage tech companies.
But I think the way we think about it is we're looking for entrepreneurs, and we often like them to be working in wacky places, doing really interesting things that are super native to them. So if you look at our portfolio company, PillPack, I think of them as a perfect example of this. Once upon a time, I would have described Uber this way, but now it seems so obvious that nobody talks about it that way. But PillPack was a pharmacist working with a technologist, coming together and saying the way pharmacies deliver to consumers kind of sucks, and we've got a better idea how to use technology to do that. Now a wave is actually starting to go there, and we're seeing other companies chasing after that. But sometimes I think the biggest challenge with thematic investing is people forget ultimately it really comes down to whose pain you're solving, what's the use case. They kind of lose sight of running that to ground, including investors who get very carried away with those themes.
It's a Boston company as well, right? PillPack's
PillPack
in Boston.
yeah.
So what are we seeing? Brad, what are you excited about this year? What do you want to see?
I've probably been asked that question every year for the last 20 years, and my answer is I don't care. And the reason
we should really put you on a different panel, though.
The reason I don't care is that I have never found that what is in the moment is the important thing. Fred said something really profound today, and I don't know how many people caught it. Like when he was banging on the table, that was exciting but not profound. The profound thing that he said was that the opportunities to invest are the ones that are ready. And he described, you can talk about the first Union Square Ventures fund, the sort of 2004 to 2008 time period, the second fund 2008, which were spectacular funds. And that time period, sort of 2007, 8, 9, I think 2007 might have been the year that they invested in Twitter, Tumblr, and Zynga, and maybe even Etsy that year. Like, it just doesn't get better, right? They were in a place, and they were investing, and they were paying attention and thinking to something that intersected with it was ready versus 5 years earlier. So that profound notion of you want to be investing in what's ready now. And when I was starting to do this 20 years ago, it was all about I want to invest in things that can be companies, not science experiments. That was the cliche that you heard from the old wizened venture capitalists. The problem is you don't know when that transition point happens. And so the lens that we've used, and I try to use, is one that I got from Jerry Colonna, who coincidentally was Fred Wilson's partner in the 90s at Flatiron Partners. In 1997, Jerry came up with this phrase, the analog. And he wanted to know what the non-digital analogy, so the analog was to the thing being proposed. What happened was about 10% of those analogs could be implemented with the current technology. And about 90%, or maybe it was 5% to 95%, the technology infrastructure And not just, connectivity and speed, but also whether people had to, like, if you wanted to do something with it, you had to carry your desktop computer around with you and plug it in and boot it up versus you had a cell phone in your pocket or an iPhone in your pocket. Those things weren't there in 1999, 2000, 2001, but the construct was right. We're in a phase again, and I would say we're on the tail end of that phase, where that same model has worked really well. But not the analog this time, but what was the 1999 analog of something that was sort of conceived and tried, but wasn't ever implemented and sustained? The interesting thing, Eric's point about waves, is I think that everybody uses kind of this demarcation of time, a year period, for example, what's hot in 2016, and that demarcation is completely specious because it has nothing to do with the calendar. And so what's interesting to me is to look at the broad areas that we invest in, which we think have 30-year durations, and try to find things that the world is ready to be able to use in a significant way, versus 5 years from now they'll be ready to use it in a significant way, or there's already a bunch of things that people are using this for in a significant way. And that intersection, I think, is powerful. This is another reason why I think more small early-stage companies around the world is better. That last panel I thought was awesome because I think Tristan said it. Like, there's a whole bunch of people that bring their bias to the discussion before they even open their ears, right? Like, I have the answer. The acne medicine is better than the, shaving pimples on your face thing, or whatever, whatever the specific is, because I don't shave.
On my face, or you just mean
I don't
in general?
shave, so it's not an
Oh,
issue.
okay.
But like the person that brings that bias to that in advance isn't even ready to have the broader thought. And I think the best investors I know don't bring that bias.
Ryan, let's tell us.
Go ahead, ask Ryan what's hot this year, though.
Ryan, what's hot? So I think that the audience.
Slack add-ons.
What?
Slack add-ons, aren't they hot?
Slack guides?
Slack add-ons.
Oh, add-ons,
There's a
like
lot of them.
Slack for Dummies books.
No, like,
the add-ons. Yeah, okay.
Like
bots.
emoticons for Slack.
Yeah, the emoticons are great. What if I want to get on Product Hunt? I want to build a great product. I want to get noticed. What stands out? What trends its way to the top of Product Hunt right now?
Yeah, our community right now is largely focused on, things that they gravitate towards are things that help them do their job, whether they're a designer, a marketer, or a founder, or whatnot. And so things like that tend to do well. But in general, people that can communicate what their product actually does very well, which is not specific to Product Hunt, but just life in general, those do much better. And so even that tagline, that 60-character tagline, means a lot, because if it says this is like improve your life, make your everything beautiful, like that doesn't tell you anything about what the product does. So things that communicate well, have a good landing page, those tend to do well. But in terms of product trends, I mentioned Slack apps. I'm seeing also a lot of conversational UI type apps, whether it's something that's integrated into Slack or SMS or email. Facebook M as an example, Magic, Operator, all of these apps are using conversational UIs that you just talk to, or you use your voice with Siri or Echo. And that's an interesting trend that we're moving towards. That now, my hypothesis with that and why now is we now have the technology to understand language better than we did before. We also have these APIs with Uber and Postmates and all these others that we can plug into to make these actually sustainable and scalable long term. But it's still very early in that stage of things.
Eric, what's going on the East Coast?
I think we're exploring a lot of the same general areas of technology on the East Coast as on the West Coast. Each city has, we do a lot in New York, a lot in Boston, a lot in San Francisco, and as well as some work out here. And each city has some of their own unique flavor. I think so let's talk about some of the tech trends you saw earlier today that in the video we saw earlier that we're being pitched a lot, right? So we're being pitched AI, we're being pitched VR, we're being pitched, what we're calling invisible interfaces, conversational interfaces. I think interfaces broadly, there is enormous opportunity for innovation in all different ways. I think for us, though, when we look at all those things, what we're trying to figure out is what's really going to matter at the application layer. So there's great innovation going on in all these areas, people pushing the limits of them, and let 1,000 flowers bloom actually means we're going to see more and more of that stuff. But I don't think you would have said that the best outcome in mobile geo was going to be livery cars, right? But that's what Uber was, right? And so I think you really have to get into what is the application that matters to the consumer. That's really so. When we talk about VR, what is it really going to be that's going to matter? Is it just do consumers really care about VR? Yeah, they'll go to science museums to experience it a little bit, but what's the thing they'll really care about? And it's always really tough. Pitching's really tough. I was rejected by 40 VCs when we raised money for Brontes, which was a pretty out there company at the time. But the truth is the onus is, and we heard how hard it can be when the cards are
Did it
stacked
just seem
against
like
you.
a really good job while you were getting slammed, or why did you then become a VC?
Well, I mean, it's almost become trite at this point because we say it so much, but we genuinely wanted to build the kind of place we would want to raise money from and have that experience of working with other founders who had been through it, who had empathy for how hard it was, who didn't use the word past, instead said things like, I don't get it, right? Because that's when we don't invest, it's because we don't get it. We don't get it maybe because we're just not smart enough to get it. We don't get it maybe because the founder didn't do a good enough job explaining it to us. We don't get it maybe because it's not going to be a great business, but we don't invest because we don't get it. It's not because we were so cool that we passed on the investment.
I also think that if you think about a lot of the specific things that were mentioned in the video and sort of the way I think a lot of the waves work, it's not the instantiation of that which we're really investing in, right? We're not investing in AI or the instantiation of AI. We're investing in, to your point, an application of some fundamental technology that captures our attention.
Yeah.
And the definition of fundamental or foundational technology and the definition of application is very murky, right? It's not a precise, well-defined thing. And I think your mobile geo is a good example, right? What was I can't even remember what the thing for social mobile geo was. Somo Gooby Blue or something like that. But there was like this, that was like the trend, the wave. And it wasn't that people said, no, actually the real opportunity is to, like transport people from point A to point B and make people that were the drivers able to do it with an iPhone. Fred jokes about teleportation, right? And we all have a mental model of what teleportation actually means, but there's a teleportation model that doesn't probably require physical relocation of a human being from one place to another. But that's not what we're talking about, right? So, or that's not what we're reacting
when
to.
Scott Belsky first pitched me Periscope when he was getting excited about it, that's how he described it. He said it will teleport you to any place to see what's happening. I don't know if anyone's periscoping this right now, but anyone can be teleported into this room, unless Mark told us we're not supposed to use that.
And I think that's part of the magic of being
Mark's a meerkat guy, I think.
What's that?
Mark's more of a meerkat brand guy.
He is.
But it's part of the magic of it, which is if you let yourself either as an investor or a founder, either way, get too pigeonholed into I'm doing this thing because it's hot right now versus I'm doing this thing because I was placed on Earth, like we heard from, and I forgot her name already.
Lizzie.
Like Lizzie said, I was placed on Earth to do this. Like those are the founders when you realize you're placed on Earth to do this thing. Those are the ones that are going to find that magic intersection.
What about China? When does China, very well-known investors, well-known entrepreneur, product creator, when does China start to make a difference? Has it started to make a difference in your world? Is the Foundry, Shenzhen satellite office going up in the next few months?
I have no fucking idea.
But what I would say, just one thing that comes to mind, Brad has no fucking idea, but we were in a company together that had all kinds of ups and downs with production in China, and we do a lot of hardware, you do a lot of hardware, and it's a constant discussion, right? How to with our hardware companies, how to interface with China well and how to make it work. We had a company that had to come back on shore because it wasn't going well.
MakerBot tried to did all their manufacturing in Brooklyn and then decided they were going to try to do scaled up manufacturing in Shenzhen, and it was a disaster. Shut it down and opened a factory in Brooklyn, which ended up being phenomenal.
Yeah, so besides it obviously being an absolutely huge market for all of our companies and trying to figure out how to go into those markets, and we've seen historic tech companies struggle in all kinds of ways. And
do you just ignore it for the companies that you have?
The contrast I would say is if you're a proud owner of a BB-8 robot from Sphero, it was made in Shenzhen. So this is the geography phenomenon. Like when I say I don't have a clue, I don't have a clue from an investment perspective. is it impacting me from a business? Absolutely. But that's not new, right? From an investor perspective, are we going to start investing in China as a firm? No, that's not what we do. We invest in the U.S. And does that mean that we're limited in terms of what we can do? Yes. By definition, we've tried to create limits on what we can do so that we can focus on the things that we feel like we could be really good at.
Don't you think it's more new or more recent from a customer standpoint, right? Our companies are going into China much faster, much more aggressively than I think would have been true 10 years ago.
Well, I think, Alibaba and others are demonstrations of this. I can't remember, what was the company that Ed Roberts at MIT funded the Chinese Yahoo version in like 1995 or 6? Sina, S-I-N-A?
Sure.
Was that, anybody remember? Was that the one that was the original? Not Weibo owns them
We
now.
couldn't get in that deal.
Yeah, there was in mid-90s, and it ended up being a very big, successful, right? Baidu was another example of that, that we learned. So yes, I agree, but I'm not sure how to process it other than accept it as, is China more important than Brazil? Which, we have several of
Some would argue yes. Most definitely.
Yeah, right. Several of our B2B SaaS companies see their biggest international expansion in Brazil, which I would have never thought.
Well, I was just in China 3 months ago, and I heard that there's going to be one of this top entrepreneur people at Tencent said there's going to be 60 million entrepreneurs in China by 2020. So to me, as somebody who is an entrepreneur, it seems like something that's a big deal. But, well, I don't know anything, so.
But I didn't say it was a big deal. I didn't say that. I said I have no clue.
I think it's also fair to say that China, and I'm not that savvy about this, but has built a reasonably robust venture market that is growing and maturing. And that doesn't mean we'd never be open to doing something there. We've actually had tremendous luck, actually, in Korea. So the right opportunity, the right circumstance, which I never would have expected to be there with a company called Coupang. But if we saw the right thing, we would do it. But my view is there are very good investors there looking on the ground at opportunities, and so it makes it a lot harder to be an investor on the East Coast of the United States, spending a lot of time thinking about how to invest in China.
Ryan, where are you seeing companies and entrepreneurs coming from globally? Is it centered here? Is it centered somewhere else? Is it coming from everywhere? What's happening?
Yeah, so there's a guy named Isaac in the community. He actually built on top of our API this map. It's called Maker Hunt. And he referenced people's Twitter location data, which we have access to, the makers of these products, and found out where they live. And he created a map showing where all the products on product and where they were made. And so you'll see clusters in SF in New York, which you'd expect, but you also see Vancouver and Berlin and Paris, and even some in Tokyo. And so you're seeing these hubs, these startup hubs emerging in, of course, big metropolitan areas. And there's another, going back to the trends piece, there's an interesting movement towards remote working and distributed teams as well. Our team is across the world, from Bulgaria to Denver to London, and many other companies more and more are moving in that direction. I don't know if you're investing in a lot of distributed teams, but we're working in a world where people can work on their own and they can use tools like Slack and GitHub and Trello and other things to work together remotely. And I find that's going to be a trend continuing in the future.
I'll underscore that. I think that's actually a very powerful current trend. There was a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, the idea of distributed teams was a terrifying thing for investors in a young company. The only version of that anybody was really open to was, we have a software development team in India. I think what we see today with many of our companies that we're investors in is very rapid horizontal scaling of the business versus vertical scaling, right? Vertical scaling would be everybody in one place. Horizontal scaling would be geographically dispersed. And this is especially true, like if you're an acolyte of Steve Blank and Eric Ries, and sort of the notion that you want to have relatively small teams iterating quickly. If you early on in the life of your company wire it up so that it can be distributed, then you can scale horizontally a lot more. Many companies wait for a long time, have critical mass in one piece, and then start. And the muscles are not there. It's a headquarter mentality. It's to come to one place. So I'm seeing this, and it's not that companies have 2 locations. It's that they have many locations. And it's not that they all work at home. It's they have critical masses in different places, but those places grow up independently of each other. I think that's a very powerful now.
That's an interesting insight, because you're saying that basically, as long as it's ingrained in the culture or the DNA of the company, at the early stage, like a WordPress or Git did, where the first 2 guys were in different places, where they just kind of, then you can then you can actually still build a great company and be dispersed.
I'm still terrified. I just think the earliest stages.
I love it.
And you've been doing. We were talking about this yesterday, right? But you've done a lot of supporting your companies via teleconference.
Well, I live in Boulder, Colorado, so I had to build. I and my partner, Jason Ryan, had to build our lives. So we had two choices. We could either get on airplanes all the time, which we have done a lot of over the years, or, and it's really an and clause, and we could figure out how to be effective in a remote setting with lots of different things. And when you force yourself to think that way as a founder, right? Forget about us as a venture firm, but as a founder, I think if you decide early that that's important to you, you can do a great job. And 5 years ago, it was extremely hard to do well. I think the counter is true too. I think you can absolutely scale vertically, but you have to be conscious that that's going to limit other options.
I think there's a point where you need to switch that. I just think the challenge is it's very hard to. Early stage companies need a lot of leadership. It's not a lot of management, a lot of leadership. It's very hard to lead when you're not physically face to face with people. It's doable, but it adds a meaningful extra layer of challenge.
I think it certainly is more challenging in some respect, but there's also so many advantages in that you have now the world population as your potential teammates. And that's a huge thing, and also it's much cheaper. San Francisco is very, very expensive where I live versus Bulgaria and other parts of the world. So there's a lot of pros, but yes, you're absolutely right. Working together and iterating on a product when you can't be there in front of a whiteboard with your teammates is challenging.
Ryan, Eric, Brad, thanks for being here. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you.